where the audio and visual capabilities are subpar and inadequate, and so are the wildlife knowledge. I'm your host, Dr. Blake Grisham with the Department of Natural Resources Management at Texas Tech University. Today we have a suite of guests from around the country, as well as our TTU TWS officers with us. Um, and I'm switching over to the video now. We have Dr. John Tomacek from A&M Extension Service. Uh, Chris, tell us about yourself.
Okay, my name is Chris Kohani. I'm a senior wildlife biologist with Vectronic Aerospace. We're based out of Berlin, Germany, and I run the North American office here in Coralville, Iowa.
Very good. Our third special guest tonight is Dr. Clint Bull. So, Clint, by all means, give us a brief introduction to you and what you do.
I'm a professor of wildlife ecology at Texas Tech and the assistant unit leader for the USGS Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. And a lot of my research is focused on non-game wildlife, especially birds of prey, but I delve into some other things as well.
And we're also joined by Sophie and Peyton and Justin and Lainey, our officers for the incoming year, starting, well, now really. Congratulations to you guys once again. John and Chris and Clint, great to have you guys. Shit happens, right?
Yes.
Feces coagulates.
Oh, man. So for our audience tonight, I posted on Facebook, okay, we have a few more of these left. This was kind of a general idea that we do these while the quarantine was happening because it's something to do on a Friday night. We get to see our friends and talk. This is something we don't anticipate doing on a weekly basis in the future, but I posted to say, what are some of the topics and who wants to talk? And John and Chris and Clint all chimed in like, hey, we have all these great stories from the field, and we are we all are field biologists in some way. We have different backgrounds and expertise, but there's always one thing in common in all of our field work. Stuff happens, and it does not go right. So when Chris and John chimed in talking about all of the things that have gone wrong in the past with their careers and experiences in the field, Clint chimed in too. I'm like, all right, we got to do this. John is expert in mesocarnivores. Chris, from the PowerPoint that he's going to share, it seems like he's tagged every animal on Earth. And there's some really cool photos. And then Clint is an expert in birds of prey, and I think he's probably radio tagged almost every species of bird of prey in North America. Maybe minus what have you not tagged, Clint?
What have I not tagged?
Yeah, what bird of prey have you not tagged in your X number of year career?
Oh, there's a lot. There's quite a few. I'm working on it though.
I think you're being extremely cool.
He's like it's more than 5, less than 10. It's not that many left.
So I'm gonna guess. Snail kites, no?
No.
Okay.
I'm really sparse on owls.
Owls, okay.
And
deer falcons, have you tagged deer falcons?
I have not.
Okay.
None of the big falcons. Most of the bootios, pretty much all the bootios.
And some really cool ones at that too. Greyhawks and things like that.
Yeah.
Zone tails.
Yeah.
Have you ever tagged a blackhawk?
I've tagged quite a few blackhawks.
That's that kind of stuff. Most people will, one, they don't know what those species are, but two, it's the kind of stuff I want to hear about today because they're extremely unique.
Well, Blackhawks taught me a lesson too, which was one of the things from the field where things happen. So we can share that.
Well, let's start there. Let's talk about Blackhawks and what did they teach you? And then Chris, we'll get to your PowerPoint. I just want this to be natural and everyone have a good time.
Yeah, no worries.
A lot of people look at a bird of prey and they see that big hooked beak and they think that's the business end. And the reality is that with most birds of prey, that is not the business end. The business end is the feet, and the feet can really, really hurt you. And that was my experience all along. You know, occasionally falcons kind of like to bite. Bald eagles tend to bite. But really, the bites aren't that. I'd rather be bitten by any bird of prey compared to being bitten by a parrot or really even a grosbeak. If you've ever been latched onto by a cardinal, it's like having a pair of vice grips on you.
That's why I was
And
about to chime in there and say that the problem students and techniques, we give them cardinals
yeah,
as a lesson.
So that's the thing, right? I mean, we were teaching some kids from Purdue University a couple of years ago, and you're demonstrating how to do a release, and all we had was a cardinal. And so, student opens their hands, and it's this beautiful moment, and it stops, and it turns around and looks at you, bites the web of your hand, and I swore give you like the fourth primary, and then flies off, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the thing is that when I first started working with Blackhawks, and this is back between my master's and my PhD, I was trying to get a doctoral program going on Blackhawks. And a buddy and I, we were out trapping Blackhawks and kind of getting to know them. And the first one I caught, I was jacked out of my mind. Very few had ever been captured live and banded and stuff. And so I was really, really happy about this. And typically, what you do is you hold the legs in your hands to keep the feet, because that's the business end, right? And you kind of keep them controlled, and you'll tuck the bird up against you, kind of like you're cradling the baby while you're walking to where you're going to go band it and everything. And this bird it was like a nastiest snake strike. It was like a coach whip strike. And I mean, it was biting me on the chest, biting me on the stomach, biting me on the arm. My friend had walked by, it was dashing its head out, striking like a snake biting. I mean, I was like, what the hell have I gotten myself into with this bird? And I learned after that, I almost always use hoods now when I when I work with birds of prey. I was a little self-confident, and you learn some of these lessons, and yeah, that was a little eye-opening one for me.
What so John, what's the worst injury you've ever accidentally sustained?
Accidentally, meaning I didn't mean to handle that animal, or meaning I meant to handle the animal, but it still did something bad to me?
Porque no los dos.
Do I
So,
know?
which one? What's the worst one you've ever?
I think the worst one I've had that also taught me a lesson. So y'all know, even out of research, I did a lot of foothold trapping, and I had a bobcat caught in a coyote set one time. And there's a few things to know on a research front, like working with canids. Whatever, they're fine. You don't need drugs. Cats, their feet are made of danger.
Yeah.
Take that statement to the bank. This is how I learned two things. One, carry a riot shield, and two, don't be there. So I had this bobcat in a coyote set, and the cat's fine. It's just mad at me. And so I'm there, and I've got a Y pole and a catch pole and me. And it's like, okay, well, how am I going to let this thing out? And I'm thinking canids, right? So no big deal. I get a catch pole around its neck. We're in good shape. Hold its head down. I can do this. And then I'm going to use my feet to open the trap, right? To let it out. Yeah, so about that, I got 1 foot in the trap, but it's got 3 danger feet ready to go. And so got the head held down, and it's doing this number trying to get up. And I reach down, you can't see my feet. I reach down with my feet to step on the sides of that trap. And before I get them down all the way, it gets me with a hind foot. It digs into my calf. And at that moment, I go, Gah! And I let go of the pole, which was also not good. And it gets the other foot up out of the trap like it's supposed to. And I'm scrambling to get the pole. And I do get the pole. And it gets like 2 or 3, I don't know. It was like fur and claws everywhere. And at this point, I'm just trying to let the pole loose.
Yeah.
So you go home after that and you're bleeding. And it wasn't that bad, but it's not fun. And you're lacerated and your pants are ruined. And my wife just looks at me and goes, what the hell happened to your pants? Those were new pants. Danger cat. So I think that for me was probably the worst one I ever had that actually got me. I've had a bunch of near misses, but that one was probably the worst.
Chris, what about you? You ever sustained any injuries in the field?
Well, I've been beat up by more deer than anything, but I think my favorite story is a releasing a wolf that we hadn't drugged or anything. We were just we were new to learning how to catch wolves, and we were catching them with net guns, which after about 3 of them, they chew through the nets as they run. So they run through the nets, they chew through and keep running. But we finally got a couple, and we worked up this wolf. And normally we use electrical tape to tape the muzzle shut. And me and another guy were going to release it, and it was, okay, it'll be 1, 2, and 3, right? So 1, 2, 3. Well, for me, it was 1, 2, and 3. For him, it was 1, 2, 3. So he let go of his end, and I was still trying to take the muzzle off. threw it, it reached around and grabbed my Carhartt, missed my forearm, gave me a quick bite on it, and took off running. But had it gotten onto my forearm, it probably would have crushed my forearm.
With ease.
Yes.
With
So
ease.
communication's the key.
Oh yeah, mine is a wild turkey of all things. Game birds is just like you're holding a chicken nugget. There's nothing really bad about them. But this was another instance of overconfidence. I was finishing up my MS degree. It was the last summer of my field season, and I had all but one or two transmitters left in my stockpile, and we had a bunch of birds coming to bait. I'm like, all right, I'm going to shoot the rocket net, ban these birds, get them out of here. I'm going to go home and I'm done with field work forever for my MS. And we had a big group of Jakes and Toms. This was in the summer. This was July. Um, Roosting overhead. They flew down. We shot them. We caught them. So we start banning them and blah blah blah. And one of the close to the last birds that we finished. This was myself, Mark McConnell, who's now at Mississippi State, and my field technician, Hooch. I had this big tom. You hold head back this way. You're holding the animal, but I was being a jerk, and I didn't have it held as tight as I should. And the wing on this side, in the process of the net firing, the 10th primary broke off, and it left the shaft sticking out. So it was like half a feather, and then the shaft sticking out with like a barb that was like a razor. And I kind of left it like this, and the wing got loose, and it lifted up just enough to cut me across the face right here. From like my hairline's receded in a long time, but it was all the way across my face, and it got under me just enough where it cut the whole way, and blood just started streaming down my face the whole way. And I don't have a scar, thank goodness, but it was the same situation. Like I went home, I from the Chapel Basin to Baton Rouge about an hour. I finally got patched up. I had blood all over me, and I get home and Elizabeth was like, "Well, what happened?" Turkey. She's like, "Well, that was a good shirt." Not anymore. But that's the worst non-intentional injury I've ever had.
That's crazy. I think what's interesting about these though is like Chris, the near miss, and it could have been so much worse, but the animal wasn't really trying to hurt you; it just needed to deal with you.
Exactly.
That's why I tell people I worry way more about domestic animals. So I had a Great Pyrenees get caught in a foothold trap one time. Again, Pyrenees is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the thing about traps is it's cut off the circulation. So it's like your foot falls asleep. Dog's fine, pet the puppy, no big deal. Go ahead and open the trap up. And when the blood circulation hits the foot again, swings around and grabs my arm. Doesn't bite down and stops and goes, oh, that's not good. And then, does the lick and roll over thing. Good puppy.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, no, you're not worried about me. You're just going to deal with me.
Yeah. So that's a good introduction. Thank you guys for joining us and welcome for our guest. What I'm going to do now is Chris has this little presentation, and I've gone through and kind of sort of deleted most of the photos that I thought were either duplicates or not relevant to this, and I'll click through them and you tell me go, no, yes, whatever.
Sure.
Okay, but we have all sorts of interesting animals. And for our audience, John, myself, and Clint and Chris, we went to school, and I was kind of the last of the cohort when we did very high frequency telemetry. And Chris is going to give you some more information about GPS and PTT and iridium technologies, which are more common these days and much better, at least data perspective. But one of the in the past, when we were doing very high frequency, is you had to go out and triangulate the location of the animal that was wearing that radio tag, and that a lot of technicians, a lot of time in the field. Like seriously, most of my dissertation and MS work was 8 to 12 hours a day of people rotating in and out doing triangulations. And that was just for one location. And I don't want to dig too much into Chris's presentation, but the technologies we have now I have scaled coil transmitters that can collect a location every 10 minutes. What we were using is kind of sorta is just a tool in the toolbox now, and maybe not the go-to one. But what it resulted in was a lot of really fun stories because you weren't downloading the data on your computer, you weren't sitting in your office, you were out in the field trying to collect those data. For example, I had a wild turkey. The mortality sensor would shut down for about 3 days in a row. So I nicknamed him Jesus. I'm buying my ticket to hell. And then he would he would get up and miraculously move. On the third day, it's like, all right, he's gone somewhere else. And eventually, a bobcat, ate him for dinner. But there's a lot of interesting stories like that. So what I'm going to do here. Uh, Chris and John and Clint and the students, you'll be in the back. You'll hear their voices. They won't see you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this PowerPoint over here. And Chris, you may not be able to see it. Let me see if I can
Okay.
share my. I'm going to share my screen, so I'll make it easier on everyone.
Well, the way this, I just had this PowerPoint laying around a couple of years ago. I got invited to go give a talk at be the banquet speaker for the South Dakota chapter of the Wildlife Society. And they wanted a historical perspective on radio telemetry. And I thought, I'm not that old. I can't give a historical perspective. But as I sat around and started going through and I go, yeah, I was there for that. Yeah, I was there for that. So, I spent a lot of time and I started putting this thing together, and it was kind of a lighthearted talk, and I just flipped it on to Blake just because I had it, and by no means do I want to take over the discussion, but I think the title slide kind of says it all. If you look through some of the old, and I'm talking late 80s, 90s, and maybe even early 2000s, there was always a clause in the methods section that said under adverse field conditions, which if you think about it, what it really meant was some stuff didn't work and we got the best that we could. Here's what we got. So that's kind of the title of it. And Blake, if you want to go to the next
you can
slide.
see the presentation then. Is that correct? Yep. You can see it. I moved
I
the
can see
video
it,
off
yeah.
the screen, so it's all the presentation. It's I'll put it here in presentation mode, so everyone can see the.
That's really good.
The video or the photos here. So you just I'll be the host and moderator. You just tell me to click, and
You bet.
audience as well as Dr. Bowl, feel free to chime in there anytime when we're talking about these things. Feel free to share your stories and your own personal stories about telemetry or the time you got your truck stuck. So, Chris, by all means.
So like Blake said, where you can get transmitters that are taking, a fix every 2 minutes on small things. This is where we started with. This is the Nimbus 3 weather satellite. This was the first satellite tracking. The Craighead brothers that did a lot of work in Yellowstone. If you remember the old National Geographic where they're working on a grizzly bear and the bear wakes up and they all jump into the station wagon and the bear starts attacking the station wagon. These are the same two guys that did that work. But the first satellite collar weighed 23 pounds. They put it on an elk, and that's where the elk stayed because it didn't get up. But it was part of a collaboration with NASA, and we've got radio tracking equipment, that is milligrams in size, but this is kind of where it first started. Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah.
So this is a smaller version of that. This has happened in the 1970s where they were able to come into a joint venture again with NASA. This is on a polar bear, and it actually worked a little bit better. The problem is that with polar bears, their head is the same size as their neck. So if you can look over the shoulders, there's actually a harness that goes around the shoulder that allows that satellite collar to stay on. The other interesting thing about it is that thing contained like 23 D-cell batteries, so big D-cells. But it was our first insight into an animal that covered a large area that we knew virtually nothing about. So got a lot of good historical or early data back in the 70s on it. You can go next slide. Here's a neat project that we dealt with that's a little bit more recent. So everybody knows about Chernobyl, right? Nuclear power plant blew up. Pretty much the city was abandoned. And if you watch some of the National Geographic specials, you can actually watch the shows where the animals have actually recolonized the area. Well, with monitoring for radioactivity, they have pretty much a static location where it just monitors the radioactivity in that location. Well, what the researchers did is they asked us if we could develop a collar that would also measure the radioactivity, and therefore the animals became the sentinels. And as they moved through the environment, they got a GPS location and they took a reading for the radioactivity levels. And then both those data were remotely transmitted. So that was really kind of a cool project.
So that was basically a wildlife-based mobile Geiger counter
Exactly.
with the GPS transmitter.
Exactly. And the researchers could only go in for 3 days at a time to catch these animals, collar them, and then let them go.
So, Chris, what year was that?
It wasn't that long ago. In fact, I saw an email today from one of our customers that was asking about one. So it's still an ongoing project. The University of Georgia's been involved with it.
Yep, yep. Is that, so in your photo there, the yellow deal, is that for pit tag reader?
I'm assuming so, or it could have been a Geiger. I'm not quite sure what equipment they were using.
Yeah. And that wolf population is thriving, correct?
Oh yeah.
The wolves, the bison, I think I saw muskox. I mean, it's been crazy what's happened to that area.
That's amazing. So
why don't they just go in at night and catch them while they're glowing?
Right?
So Chris, just as FYI, I have deleted some of your slides. So I don't mean to catch you off guard with some of these things. So if it's not relevant, just let me know. So I do have the Judas Goat project because it seems like it'd be fun.
So yeah, so Judas goats. John could talk about feral pigs. Same kind of behavior. Basically, you they call them Judas because they betray the rest of the pack or the herd. So you put a collar on it, and he walks over, and all of a sudden you find that animal with the radio collar on, and you remove all of his buddies from the landscape, and then he walks over and finds another group. So as groups go, as you see that animal coming across the horizon, the Judas goat, you know it's time to move out of there. John, maybe you could talk some with the pig work and same type of deal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's kind of idea with pig management. It got to be where we asked the question, you know, how can we get in here and manage these sounders? They're big social units, and so the idea was you put a tracking collar on one animal in the sounder. You can find it later. You take advantage of that animal to know where they are, where they're spending their time, and you can get good control on them, which works to an extent. Kind of the nasty backside of it sometimes is sounders have a little bit of dynamism. They change up, so sometimes you end up with a Judas pig in a group that it didn't start with or out on its own, or two Judas pigs together, which is my personal favorite. But I don't know what happened here, but apparently, you know, two animals of the same color got together. But it's been interesting. You know, pigs, a similar thing, like you mentioned with the polar bear, Chris. Man, keeping collars on those things, it's just tough.
And I got a question for you. Are the horns on this animal painted orange for "Do not shoot" this one?
Yeah, exactly. Because you go into so much effort of catching that one animal, you don't want to remove it.
So Clint, you have some experience with feral goats in the islands. Did the BVI, have they done any removals similar to anything like this?
They never used a Judas animal, to my knowledge, but those were the island that I was familiar with. It was a sheep, and the sheep were. Blake had been down there to the island. That the sheep had pretty much just torn up the forest understory where it was just bare ground, and they ended up having a New Zealand crew come in and do aerial gunning from a helicopter. And from New Zealand coming into the BVI, where they don't even like having guns around and stuff, that was a political issue to get through in the first place. But then they, after they had done the aerial gunning for, I think it was like 3 days, and this was about a 3.5 hectare island, and it took them 3 days with aerial gunning. And then they went in with dogs to try to get out the rest. And that 3.5 hectare island, is that right? No, it's I can't remember right off the top of my head. It's a small island, but they took out like 450 some odd sheep off that island.
Yeah. So
and I got back down there, and they did a really good job. But I think that was a situation where they didn't really need a Judas animal because the sheep were so dispersed across the whole thing, and it was a kind of a constrained area to start in.
I'm not sure with the story with the Galapagos, and Clint, feel free to chime in here and tell me if I'm wrong, but originally the sheep and goats and even pigs in the Virgin Islands and other islands across the globe, they were introduced animals from people sailing across and then discovering these islands. That, okay, if we need food, here's sheep,
Yep.
and then they become invasive and exotic and browsing and grazing the native foliage down to the ground and competitive with other animals and destroying
Well,
habitat. So
that's it's still a problem in the Caribbean, in some of the small islands where the authorities will go in and remove goats or sheep. The islanders will go and put more back out there.
Yeah.
Because they have this idea that if there's animals there, that if they ever get shipwrecked or whatever, that there's a food source for them.
Yep. And you'll see on Instagram and other social media accounts about the famous island in the Caribbean that has swimming pigs. And have you guys seen that? And everyone, the social media influencers try to, get photos with the swimming pigs, and all I'm thinking is floating barbecue. With that.
Oh, there's the Arkansas coming out now.
Right? It's, ecologically, one lives in a world alone, and what is that? What is it? Leopold James called one lives alone in a world of wounds. And I'm thinking I can remedy that wound. That one invasive I can take care of.
So this is interesting, Blake. When we talk about pig management, one thing I think, especially as students, don't always realize, we have these ideas like we're going to remove pigs, and this is the federal standard everywhere. We're going to remove pigs. A little bit of sensitivity to local and especially indigenous cultures is really important. So we went into Hawaii, right? And we said, we're going to kill all the pigs, which if you come to Texas and say that, most people are for that. Some people don't want it. We went to Hawaii and said that, and all the native Hawaiians heard was, we're going to completely remove every aspect of this animal that's important to your culture.
Yeah.
Like suggesting to Plains Native Americans, you're going to remove the bison. It was bad. Because these islands settled by early Polynesians brought pigs with them, but now numbers have gotten to an extent where they're a real problem, and having that conversation about, okay, we're going to take some of them, but not all of them, and we need your help. This is a little different.
And it's not just islands. I mean, Berlin's got pigs running around in Berlin. I mean, a city of Berlin, and they got feral pigs running around there.
Yeah, well, or my personal favorite is Germany's problem with raccoons, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's a problem. It's an exotic invasive. And again, the trapper and me from the US is like, dog-proof raccoon traps, I could fix this in 2 weeks, not a problem. And a bunch of backwoods folks from the American South are big thumbs up, ready to go. And you can't, because the law precludes doing that in Europe. So you go, what the heck?
Yeah, it's much different. Yeah, for sure.
What I really like about this particular photo right here is this animal, same animal here. It just looks defeated. It's just like it's about to become the most unpopular goat.
Right? The scarlet letter.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's like I've been captured and painted. This is
Go
it.
back up.
Humiliated.
Where were you last night and what were you doing?
Yep, and everything from here on out.
It's gonna be out there. Hey baby, bam! Oh, there you go. Hey baby, bam!
All his love interests seem to expire too soon. Moving on, let's see what else I got here on this presentation. Biology, go ahead.
So here's another project. Same thing. This is in New Zealand this time, and chamois that they're moving. It's interesting because no offense to my Texas friends, but they'll pay $75,000 to get a helicopter ride to the top of a mountain to shoot an animal that the New Zealand, I forget what they're called, their game commission are trying to remove because they're eating too much vegetation. But a bunch of Americans will go down there and pay a lot of money to basically get airlifted to the top of a mountain and go, yeah, that one, shoot it. But I thought it was kind of interesting the way that they're transporting them and moving them. They're basically putting
they're
it
shoving
in
them in the
truck.
cargo hold of a helicopter.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an Cook issue. Waiting to happen.
Right? No blindfold or anything.
That just makes me nervous just to look at it, Chris. I feel my permits flying away as I look at it.
You're right. What happens if that hatch opens up and the animal falls out?
Oh, yeah.
One, issues to the animal, but two, the permit.
Adverse field conditions, Blake.
Stuff happens.
Bingo.
Right? So I found this little creature interesting. I don't know what it is.
Does anybody know what this is?
That's a hootia.
Ah, yes, it is.
A what? One more time, please.
A hootia, or more commonly referred to as a banana rat. It's down in the Caribbean, and this was actually a project. No one's ever radio collared them before, and we went beyond radio collaring to. Well, let me take that back. They used VHF collars a long time ago. But on the naval base in Guantanamo Bay, one half of the base, or the base that the Americans were on, were being overrun by these things, and they were eating all the vegetation, and wildlife services were getting called in to help manage this population. And then across the no man's zone and in the Cuba itself, they were pretty sparse because they were a huge source of protein. So a lot of the Cubans were actually harvesting these animals and using them for a food source. So what was really unique about this that we learned is we put these GPS backpack transmitters on, which are the same rendition that like Mike Chamberlain and Brett Collier are used for wild turkeys. And we found out that they were using the culvert system on the base to travel, because we never found any dead ones alongside the road, given their high populations. They were smart enough to figure out to use the culverts. They were both fossorial and arboreal, so we'd find them up in trees as well as down in some of the pill bunkers. And one of the more frightening moments of my career where we were looking for one, and it was in the old Cold War bunkers that they had set up to basically protect the bay and the ships when they came in. So we climbed down in this thing, and it's wet and cold and dark. And we shine a light, and in the back of this pillbox is a Puerto Rican python with a head about like that big, and it probably was 16 feet coiled up in there. And I've never been that close to a big snake like that without some sort of glass or wall between me and that snake. To be in that room with that snake really kind of scared me a bit.
I had a similar issue happen with a cottonmouth. Now, not nearly as big, or they are scary because they can typically be aggressive, especially if you interfere with their space. I was baiting for wild turkeys in South Louisiana, and those nets stayed out, and they got damp, and it's a really good incubation place for a cold-blooded animal to stay warm and or cold. And I reached down to pull corn out, and literally, down on the ground underneath the net, 2 inches from my hand, is about a 4-foot cottonmouth that's coiled up with its mouth just wide open looking at me. I mean, I think I shit my pants, to be 100% honest, because I didn't know what to do, because I've had them actually strike at the heat of my ATV when I was driving through. They can be fairly aggressive animals. I've never been so scared in my life in the field, because I was out there by myself. In the afternoon, it was like 7 o'clock at night on like July 25th in the middle of South Louisiana. I'm like, I'm about to become a statistic, and terrifying. So I didn't mean to chime in here, but everyone seems to have one of those interesting snake stories.
Snake stories, yeah.
And, Clint taught me as a PhD student, what are the 3 statistics with snake bites? Males 18 to 25 and alcohol. Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think with most snake bites, those are the 3 main demographic parameters associated with like 98% of snake bites in North America.
Well, it's like when you read about somebody died from a coral snake bite, and then you read down in the article and they go, but they were also highly intoxicated and already passed out.
Oh yeah, it's usually our fault, and that was my fault because I wasn't situationally aware at this point. Guarantee you, every time before I got off the ATV, from then on out, I looked down on the ground underneath that net to make sure there wasn't anything special waiting for me when I was dumping out corn. I do got a question for you, Chris. While I have this photo on, and John, what are these things on this animal right here by the eyes?
Physiology wise, I don't know. I would assume it's some sort of gland, but I don't know.
Okay.
I would do the same, but I don't know. It's outside of my area of expertise. I just know what the freaking animal looks like, because I got a buddy that worked with Chris on it. So it's
that's extremely cool. So even with the fossorial behavior of this animal, you can still track it with this technology. Is that correct?
Yeah, until they you get the locations and they disappear and then show up on the other end of the island, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And then we were able to find out that they're using these culvert systems to get from one area to another area.
It's amazing how adaptable
Yeah.
these animals are.
Good security on the Marine Corps base there.
Yeah, right.
So
that kind of gives you an idea of the size and some of the habitat that
I was
we
about to
find.
ask what was a size reference, but what's the official name one more time?
The hutia.
Or banana rat, right?
Yep. And they're fairly common throughout the Caribbean.
I'm guessing somebody from Louisiana would probably eat that.
Yeah, it's a weird cross between like a muskrat and a possum, and they're really kind of unique.
It's a very interesting animal. So we're going to move on here and see what else we have. Tell us about what you see. What's going on here?
Well, this is we were catching elk calves, and this is more of a story about outside the elk calf work. So a good friend of mine, Lou Cornicelli, and we traveled down there to work with the folks with the Kentucky Department of Game and Fish, and the story that he always tells, and Lou's a talker. If you don't know Lou Cornicelli, and we were getting all geared up, and we picked up some students from the local college, and we were sitting in the truck, and Lou's making small talk with them, and like a lot of people, trying to learn something about their university. Lou turns around to these students and he goes, "So, how big's your school?" And most people would respond with, "Oh, 26,000 students or 13,000 students." And two students are kind of conferring in the back seat, talking to one another, and they kind of go, "It's about 2 blocks by 3 blocks wide," which wasn't the answer we were looking for, but it was certainly and I told Lou, no more questions.
So one of the hardest things to do is to write a test that's comprehensive enough to get the question that you're expecting. And especially with upper level classes, you get all sorts of answers. And the problem is, at least the way I grade, I give them credit if they're not wrong. I mean, that answer wasn't wrong. It just doesn't
No.
what you're looking for. That's is that the elk calf there?
Yeah, those are the elk calves. Cute little critters, though.
Is that a VHF air tag or a GPS?
Yeah, it's a VHF air tag, and this was part of the early project in Kentucky when they reintroduced the elk back into the Kentucky, sponsored with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So, and of course, everybody I think knows that those populations are doing very well, and they're moving into Tennessee and North Carolina, and yeah, it was a lot of great research done down there, and certainly a lot of work.
Yeah, when I was in Arkansas undergrad there, they had the reintroduction of the elk herds to the Buffalo River, which it's a huge success. And then Tennessee and Kentucky, it's good to see all that stuff continuing on. There's a funny story of a tech student who was doing VHF telemetry on elk up at Las Caldera in New Mexico, where there is no longer a truck in our fleet because it rolled down a mountain, pretty much. I mean, it flipped and it kept flipping. Thank goodness he wasn't in the truck when it happened, but it gone. It's not coming back.
I think, Blake, I think that was only one of multiple trucks that was destroyed by that guy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There was a multiple offense occasion with this individual. I won't say the name or anything, but he was really good at destroying equipment. So. I was going to say real quick, he's now a medical doctor. So,
so I will chime in just briefly, and Blake, I don't know if the photo I sent you earlier ended up in the slide set or not.
I do. Let me scroll down to it real quick so you can.
No, we can wait on it. It's no big deal.
Right here.
Okay. Yeah. So trucks are an interesting thing. So this was taken by a field technician of mine. This is when I was in my PhD program. And so despite the Dakota license plate, we're in the rolling plains of Texas on a well-to-do, very famous ranch up near Pampa. At any rate, you'll notice the blaze orange duct tape and the suspiciously dented in front bumper. So my advisor in my PhD, the esteemed Dr. Marcus Peterson, was very fond of saying that he did not want to support a research fleet because all grad students did was tear up equipment. And I prided myself on not doing that. However, somewhere in the field, something happened and we ran into something. Make a long story short, I was not paying attention and I ran off a ranch road and there was a culvert and it was bad and we crunched everything up. And this is a rental truck. Now, at the time, the university's rental agreement, I was freaking out, guys. I'm a poor grad student, not making any money, going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And the headlight's falling out like an eyeball that's come out of the socket. It's hanging. And so students that get to know me, I always have a thing like the most important piece of field equipment is a shovel, right? And I'll say that to everybody. I use the shovel to pry the air dam off, and I always carried a crowbar with me because why not? I used the crowbar to pry the bumper back into shape enough to actually get the tire not to rub. Somehow the airbags didn't go off, so that was a win. But I'm going through our contract with Enterprise Rent-A-Car going, Jesus, this is terrible, this is bad. And there was a line in there that said if you paid for this damage waiver, which the university did, you are not responsible for any damage, unintentional or intentional. That last part killed me. So I called Enterprise, I told them what happened, and the guy goes, oh no, you're good, man. Does it still drive? Yes. Do you want to bring it in? No. I have another 4 weeks worth of work to do out here. I cannot come in. If I slow down by a day, my boss is going to chew me out. So it got worse throughout the field season. I will just say that. By the end, it was held together with baling wire and blaze orange duct tape, which I always carry with me. So it's one of those things where I was counting quail and picking up data loggers on Bob White Nest. By the end of that field season, that thing was pretty raunchy. We brought it back to the Enterprise Rent-A-Car in College Station and rolled into the lot like that with pieces hanging off and stuff wired back together. And the guy looks at me and he goes, what the heck happened? I went, no, I'm a grad student, and I was going to explain. He cut me off and he goes, got it, grad student.
Rental cars are amazing.
I've got one quick Texas Tech story. Well, I got two Texas Tech stories. The first one is about somebody that we all know very well in Texas Parks and Wildlife. Back when I was working on Elephant Mountain, we had the old radio telemetry stands that sat in the back of the pickup.
Yep,
and they were bolted to the frame of the pickup so that they would on the roads and whatnot. And we would have a middle mast that would stand up about probably 2 feet above the cab. Well, we lived at Elephant Mountain. We would go down to the old mansion and wash our clothes down there. And this person that we all know of was driving, went underneath the overhang of the mansion and forgot about the mast being up and totally ripped the whole bed of the pickup out and left it laying there. And he felt really, really bad about that situation. And then the other time was for the Texas Tech folks. Dr. Ballard let me borrow his car one time, of all things, to drive from Texas Tech down to West Texas to capture some deer. And got done capturing deer and left early in the morning to come back to Tech. And the biologist I was with said, hey, watch out for the deer. They like to hang around the draws. They're out this time in the morning. And I thought, yeah, no problem. So I'm cruising down one of those Texas farm roads and doing about 70, 80 because there's nobody around. And sure shit, a herd of deer come out of those draws, and he had a Saturn with the plastic sides.
Oh, no.
And I hit about 3 of them. Boom, 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 boom. And I was like, oh my God, Dr. Ballard's going to kill me about this deal. So I took it to a car wash, washed it all down, got some wax, and because it was those plastic side rails, they all popped out. Dropped it all up, dropped it off at his house, and never told him that story. And he never asked about any of it. It was so lucky.
Oh man.
So we have I have a bunch of stories about a particular truck that I'm fond of, a Texas Tech truck that Clint actually bought for me when I was a PhD student as part of this chicken project. There's story after story about this truck, and one is one time I smoked a mule deer. But going back to the rental car, when I was a faculty, when I first started my faculty position, one of my startup students was Courtney Conring, who is now with Alabama Game and Fish. She came from us from Warnell. She was one of Chamberlain's former undergrads, and she was working on the Sandhill Crane project in Cibola National Wildlife Refuge and Sonny Bono National Wildlife Refuge in Southern California and Arizona, respectively. Cibola's in Arizona and Sonny Bono's in California. And so I fly into Phoenix and I get a rental car because we were going to go put up some remote weather stations. So I get to Sky Harbor International and I get to the Hertz place where you get your rental car, and I just had like a compact car reserve. and the line was atrocious. And by the end of it, I don't know, 3 hours of waiting. This was right before they implemented the gold standard, whatever, you just walk in and grab the keys. Um, it was time for me to get my car. And of course, internally, it was nothing but rage, even though I didn't have anything else to do but go get a cheeseburger. But I was talking to the lady, and I was really nice to her because this wasn't her fault. There was nothing she could do. So I was just like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, appreciate it. She's like, well, you've been really nice to me today. She's like, I'm going to give you a free upgrade, honey. I was like, oh, goodness. So she gave me a Cadillac CTS, which is maybe 700 pounds, and it has a V8 in it. It's like 470 horsepower, so it'll go 0 to 60 in lightning speed. And I'm just driving this thing off southern Arizona, trying to be nice with it, and I have it loaded down with weather equipment of all things in the background. Now, to preface what happened to me, right before I got to Cibola National Wildlife Refuge, I stopped to get gas, and there's a wildlife law enforcement officer there, and I was pumping my gas, and he said, "Hey, nice car." I said, "Thanks, it's a rental." I said, "Hey, you work down at Cibola?" And he said, "I've been down there a few times. I patrol this whole area." I said, "Well, yeah, my grad student Courtney is down there capturing, sandhill cranes." He's like, "Hey, yeah, I met her back in January when her and Collins were down here." I said, "Hey, small world. Thanks for everything." I shook his hand and I drove off. Well, Courtney and I did our thing at Cibola, and between Cibola, which is in southern Arizona, and Sunny Bono, which is in the Imperial Valley, there's a little back. You can go around into the dune system on, I think it's Interstate 10, but there's a little back road that goes through the desert, and it's a beautiful drive. And Cadillac CTS. So what else are you going to do on a no road and a V8? You're going to haul ass. And I would anyway, my redneck DNA. So I was just taking these curves and these hills. I don't know what speeds I were going, but it was speed of sound and most of these things. And I come over this hill, and it's like in the opening scene of National Lampoon's Vacation, where the Christmas Vacation, where the car goes flying off the hill in slow motion. It's like me coming off this little hill in slow motion through the air. And while I'm in the air, I'm looking down at a border patrol station with a border patrol agent with his arms crossed like this in the shades, just waiting for me to land. And I stopped the car and I rolled down the window and said, "Me and you need to have a talk." And I'm like, I guess we do. And long story short, after 3 hours of interrogation, he thought I was running drugs, which makes perfect sense. We finally called that law enforcement officer who could vouch for me, uh, going 120 over a hill and almost landing on a border patrol station in a Cadillac CTS. That was linked to Texas Tech University, but he wasn't happy for a very good reason. I was trying not to laugh the entire time. I knew I was going to get out of it some way, but it took longer than I expected. He was a pretty good sport about it in the end. And you're absolutely right. They're the best vehicles in the world for field work because you can turn them in for free. Because the other thing is this is me after destroying certain parts of this truck, which we'll get to. This was the most reliable piece of field equipment we had on 5 years of field work. And we'll get into this in more detail in a bit, but that sand country is the absolute worst thing for equipment ever, ever. And this truck, Clint, you can correct me. I think it lasted maybe. I think you guys officially retired it a few years ago, maybe.
Nope, it's still going. Yeah, Lucas is using that over in New Mexico on the Port Stanton project.
That is amazing because this is a little engine that could, because in the sand country here, the heavier the equipment, the more likely you are to get stuck. And for large equipment like this backhoe here, the tires are almost deflated to like 10 psi. I couldn't do that in the truck because we were driving on major highways and stuff. And there's a good story about this. Was the day that Parks and Wildlife was out there with us filming a video for their TV show. Then it goes back to the thing, but we're gonna go back to your PowerPoint presentation. But this little truck, there's nothing little about the truck, but that truck stood the test of time. There's a trailer. There's where a trailer.
That truck right now, I asked Lucas this year. I said, "You sure you still want to use that truck? Because I can trade you out to another one that are you sure it's still reliable?" And Lucas is like, "Oh man, I love that truck. It's good. It's good."
It just grows on you. I love that thing, and the much like you said, John, I really prided myself in taking care of equipment. And then when I first got to Tech, Clint was like, "All right,
You wouldn't know that, but
yeah."
Well, so
And in the end, I destroyed a ton of stuff left and right, and I tried very hard not to. But we first started, Dr. Bolt said, "Okay, this is your truck. It's through the grant project that bought this. Take care of it." And not 2 goddamn weeks later, a technician parked an ATV on top of
Oh,
it. Yeah, he was about the size of I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, 98 pounds soaking wet. And he was the only one not scared enough to load it up. The guy with him was like 6'5", 3. He's like, I'm too scared to load up this ATV. So uh, we all know Clinton did this. So Clinton ramped it up. It just kept the momentum carrying him to the top of that. But Chris, tell us about this parrot you have here.
Well, like Clint brought up before, sometimes some of the most, what appears to be the most docile birds, parrots are pretty tough on stuff. I mean, we had to put transmitters in brass casings because they would clamp down and actually cut the transmitter in half and lose it. But this is a project down in Puerto Rico, and I think it's classified as the only rainforest in the U.S. Forest Service's what they manage. Yeah. So the parrots were again, because it was an island, they were losing nests because there were a lot of not ferrets, weasels, mongoose. That's it. I knew it was one of them. And so it's been so long ago on this project. So what they were doing, they'd go up and climb up in these nests and they would eat all the eggs. So the reproduction was really low. And then plus they got hit with hurricanes. So again, these populations were constantly being put down. So what the strategy was for the Fish and Wildlife Service was to locate the nest and then basically put electric fence all around the trees so that the mongoose wouldn't get into the nest and eat the eggs. So Blake, if you click through the next slides. So they actually started a captive rearing project, which was pretty cool. So they had all these eggs and they would hatch them out in this place. And then what our part of it is that we climbed up these huge trees. You can't see it, but in that far down there, it's about an 80-foot climb up into this tree. And we put up an automatic radio telemetry station that would give us at least compass bearing, because what they were doing before is they would go out and they have somebody sit on a high point with a pair of binoculars and watch one pair. Yeah, that's from the top of it. And they would watch one pair of parrots fly off into that dense canopy and then try and locate that cavity in that tree. So a lot of man hours with not a lot of success. So we put up this telemetry station, climbed up this huge mountain, set it up. It rained on us, and then it would get sunny and rain on us again as we were up there setting this thing up about 80 feet in the tree. And then they were able to, at least with the adult birds being radio collared, you can at least get a bearing and a direction as to where they were constantly flying to, and therefore reduce the amount of time that you would spend searching for a nest. So that was kind of an interesting project and an interesting place to be. And they found a couple more nests and brought them in for folks to hatch out the eggs.
Chris, just as an aside, Chris, I've been one of those people that sat up in those towers looking for not for the parrots, but for red-tailed hawks, because there was concern about red-tailed hawks being a significant predator on the parrots there. And so that was my first stint in the Caribbean that led to a lot of others. And that was my first one, was working down in the Luquillo, and I know the captive rearing facility you're talking about. I spent some time there and everything, so it's a neat place.
Did you ever sleep there at night?
No, we had a little place down in a Palmer. We had a little rental down there.
I spent a couple nights up there in the facility there, and the frogs, I think they're called poquico frogs.
Yes,
they're loud, but they're such a cool call.
Yeah, they're pretty pervasive if it rains.
Yeah, really neat frogs. All right, so here's another one.
They're only like that big.
Yeah, they're tiny.
They're tiny little things.
Yeah, but they sound huge.
They do.
So what we have here?
All right, anybody know?
We have about a 30-second time lag with our audience, so we'll see if I don't know. It doesn't have feathers, so I'm just guessing.
Well, it is a mammal.
We'll start there. The power of deduction is pretty good. Which reminds me of another good story while we're waiting to guess. Was there was a time in South Louisiana where they were reintroducing black bears to the Chafalaya Basin, and I was showing Mike Byrne, correct, Chris?
Yeah.
I was showing
Jake
him the
Woolman was
rope.
part of that too, I think.
I was he is. I was showing him the ropes on how to capture turkeys, and like 2 days before he got there, I saw a black bear down there. No one believed me, and I was taking everyone out to bait sites for turkeys, and there was this large black mass in the center of this winter wheat field, just massive. I'm like, there's your bear right there. Turned out to be a large flock of 8 huge wild turkeys, and it was Mike and Mike Byrne and Chamberlain, the bear biologist with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and LDWF. I'm like, all right, I'm going to tech. See you guys later. I think I just walked off. So
And that right there is how you get your Gold Star Bird Nerd card.
Oh yeah, and 2 days later they confirmed the black bear sightings that I saw, but I just got too excited being an overconfident jackass. I'm like, look, there's the bear right there. It happened to be 8 wild turkeys. We don't have really any good guesses about what this guy is, so we want to.
Is it by any chance, is that a fossa?
No, it's
No? Okay.
South America.
Okay.
It's a brush dog.
Uh-huh.
So one of those, again, I love getting, working with researchers all around the world where there's a species that I don't know very well. And this was one of them that I had to do my homework on. And the unique challenges were that you can see that, I don't know if is that next slide there too there,
Yeah,
Blake?
go there. This guy here.
Yeah, so they go in and out of these dens, and one of the challenges that we had was trying to make a radio package that they weren't constantly breaking the antennas on. And we were working with Karen DiMatteo with the St. Louis Zoo, and we actually got a nice little pub out of this in terms of first establishing the size of their home range and being able to keep a collar on. And we did a lot of iterations with it. We actually worked with captive animals in the zoo, which is really beneficial. Anytime we get a new species that hasn't been worked with a lot, anytime you get a captive animal that you can spend some time and trying techniques out before you actually go to the field, it just saves you a lot of time from failure. And we learn a lot that way too when we fail.
Just for the sake of time, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost at an hour here. I don't want to go 2 hours or anything.
Yeah.
There's a few highlights here. Can you tell us a little bit what's going on here?
Yeah, so these are sea turtles. The part that you see that's in blue is kind of anti-fouling paint, and that's just so that the barnacles don't grow on it. There's a little switch, it's called the saltwater switch. So when the turtles come up to breathe, then the tag gets in the air, it turns the transmitter on, and it sends its signal, its location out to the satellites.
Very good. So I'm going to zoom out here on some of these things. This looks like another type of transmitter on a beaver. Is that correct?
Yeah, beaver tails. That's one of the techniques that we developed. It's actually a lot of collagenous, cartilaginous material in there, so you can actually drill a hole in there.
Yep.
Beavers, you can't put collars on, you can't put backpacks on. If you do the surgery, you don't get very good range on it, so we put these.
Drill the hole in it.
Drill a hole in it. Yeah.
I want to see the IACUC protocol for that.
Exactly,
We got a paper on it too.
I just want to see the line that says we're going to drill holes in beaver tail the whole time.
Like, this is a whole other discussion sometime, and maybe something we ought to do at a professional meeting. I mean, the craziest IACUC applications you've ever seen. So my chair of my dissertation committee was a DVM as well. He sat under IACUC, and he was the only wildlifer on the A&M Grand IACUC. And anytime something came in, the other guys are clinical vets, and they would look at him and go, "You gotta be shitting me. They're gonna do what?" And he'd go, "Oh yeah, no, it's fine. It's well established. Here's a pub, here's a pub, here's a pub. It's fine. You're gonna drill a hole in a beaver tail. No problem."
Yeah, so I have one framed in my office for my crane projects, and it's nothing, crazy or anything. It's just I got the verbiage approved. Is when you have to so for our audience, when you're doing institutional care and use protocol forms, you have to mention, if something goes awry in this process, how are you going to ethically euthanize the animal? And that's part of the wildlife process. Is you have animals die on you from time to time, and or they're injured, and you have to put them down efficiently, effectively.
Yeah.
Well, with greater sandhill cranes, they can be 15, 16 pounds and taller than I am. So the easiest way to ethically euthanize one is to shoot them with a shotgun. And I went all redneck one day, and in the IACUC protocol that I have framed, I said sandhill cranes will be euthanized via shotgun blast to the face, and I got it approved. It's framed just because I would never think that they please reword this to a more scientific and ethically, statement, sandhill cranes will be, euthanized via shotgun at 4 to 8 meters using a,
Yeah.
now it says shotgun blast to the face, very
So,
much so.
so when I was a new fledgling PhD, I did that with our mesocarnivore stuff, and I said, we're going to shoot a coyote in the head. If it's injured, it needs to be put down. And the note I got back was, you need to use scientific terminology, and it was suggested transcranial discharge of a projectile weapon of so much size and so many foot-pounds. And I called the reviewer and I went, "Going to shoot him in the head." He goes, "You're going to shoot him in the head."
Yeah, so we do need to have some kind of contest or something in the future about the best jargon and/or technique in the field. And I'm gonna go through these one more really quick. This is look like a cool little project with Komodo
Yeah,
dragons.
Komodo dragons. Anybody know how you catch a Komodo dragon?
Very
Very
carefully.
carefully.
Right.
Very
Because
carefully.
maybe people don't know, but their saliva is highly poisonous. So they bite you, and then they just wait until you succumb to it. So what you do is you kill a goat, you get a piece of rope, and you drag it through and have them chase the goat into a pen, and then you close the pen, and then you can handle the Komodo dragons. But you don't want to be the guy running and accidentally trip and fall.
It's like it's like the guy who the person who caught the last California condor in the wild, who laid in that box blind with all the blood and stuff on top and barehanded a condor. Is that true, Clint? It's in the wildlife techniques manual.
I don't know if it was the last way they caught them. They used bow nets a lot, but that was a common way, is using the pit traps.
Yeah, we teach that in techniques, and last year we asked. It was on the test. What was one technique used to capture California condors in the wild for captive efforts? And one guy answered it. I gave him 100% credit. Said, "Be a badass and barehand that some bitch."
That's 100% not wrong.
They're not wrong, and this reminds me of that story. You just wait for you drag the goat in for a Komodo dragon. 'Cause when I was looking at this PowerPoint earlier, I was like, I want to know how you safely capture a Komodo dragon, because I've seen the nature documentary where they bite the animal and they just wait for it to die. That sounds like a
Yeah,
horrific death.
yeah.
But what I wanted to say something about this, because in our profession, most of us work with either mammals or birds. I mean, the majority of wildlife management is geared towards those taxonomic groups, and working with reptiles can be very fun and interesting. But I've participated in a bunch of captures of big iguanas, and a Komodo was like a gigantic Godzilla iguana.
Yeah.
And that's why I said very carefully, and I wasn't being facetious or anything about that. It's just, yeah, the Komodo dragons have in their saliva, it's either a poison or it's the bacteria, or I'm not even sure they know what it is. But what a lot of people don't realize is these animals have really incredible raspy teeth that will make you bleed a lot. And they have a high biting power. But earlier, like John was talking about cats, having danger paws on all 4 feet. These animals take it to a whole nother level. I've been with people where we've caught big rock iguanas, and their claws are just razor sharp, and it's like trying to hold a live football with legs that are undulating back and forth. I mean, they can, if you're not really careful with those animals, even a small one can really rip you up. You don't approach them without a good measure of caution in how you're doing it.
So when I saw this photo, Clint, it reminded me of stout iguanas on the BVI.
Yeah.
And so I got a good story about that. So our good friend Krista, who's no longer with us, was a grad student on this project on iguanas in the BVI. We went down. I went with Clint and Dr. Perry at the time, when I was a PhD student. And when I saw this, I was thinking, okay, Komodo dragons are massive and scary, and I know that because I've seen a very large stout iguana in the wild. And it was Laura Navarrete, myself, Krista, and I think Kathleen, and I don't know if Skipper was with us this day. We were circling one of the trails on the top, and these big males. This thing was massive. It was in the canopy, and we were walking on this trail, and Krista was ahead, showing us where we needed to go to do some work. and she was separated between myself and Laura and Kathleen. And so she walked ahead, and then all of a sudden, this, I don't know, what I think of a Godzilla sized star iguana comes falling out of the canopy at an accelerating rate, and it lands between us. And of course, me being the only male, macho, no, I scream. I scream at the top of my lungs, and I like throw Laura in front of me, and Krista doesn't miss a beat. She looks back. She's like, "Are you coming? You're going to be a little bitch all day." It was like, no, I'm going to be a little bitch. You just go ahead. You lead the way, expert, and I'll follow all the ladies on this trip. You know, it's very chivalrous for me to do. But that's what got me curious about this Komodo dragon. How you actually safely capture them. So thanks for the insight there. And what is this little guy right here?
Yeah, so that's just another littler guy. I just think reptiles are generally pretty cool. What's interesting is you can see they use a bead system.
That was my question. What is that little device on the back?
Yeah, it's a bead to mark the individual. So
okay, so it's like mark reach site type stuff.
Yep, because those tags they're elastic and they'll eventually fall off. So that's kind of what it does. It helps with that recapture.
Yeah, Blake, just so you know, we were doing that with the iguanas down in the Caribbean.
What you were tagging them with the bead system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called, that's the nuchal crest, and they stick the hole through there and they put the beads in. It's like a visual identifier, like a visual ID band.
I know Krista had some with numbers on their side, and she also had string that she would follow their tracks as well.
Yeah, that was for the babies. That was for the little hatchlings, about so long. Okay. For the big dogs, she would put for part of her study, she was putting those nuchal crest beads in them.
Okay, yeah, I've never seen that, and I thought it was interesting. And the next photo I have here, this looks like a baculum. I'm really not sure what this is.
All right, this is really kind of cool. This is back from the late 70s, early 80s. With diving ducks, you can't put backpacks on diving ducks because they don't tolerate them very well. They spend a lot of time preening and whatnot. So one of the researchers out of Northern Prairie, out of Jamestown, North Dakota, came up with the idea of this prosthesis type looking thing. And it's actually a bill to fit on top of a bill. And on top of it was an integrated radio transmitter. And you can see towards distal end, the wavies, those are actually the antenna. And so the idea was to catch a diving duck and then snap this on top of their bill so that they could be transmitted. Didn't work so well, but it was just an interesting idea to try and of course, like everything, that's how you learn.
Yeah,
that's a pretty innovative idea to at least try.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so just for time's sake, there's a few others.
Just go to the one down. I think this is. I can finish up on go to the drier one.
Okay, yeah.
So what do you think's going on there? What do you see?
Audience officers.
So for time's sake,
a little bigger for everyone.
I was contacted. There you go. I was contacted by the BBC one time, and they wanted to do a series or part of a series on where do all the missing socks go. So when you get a pair of socks together and you end up with one, where's the other one at? So we actually made little transmitters, and they would sew them into pairs of socks, and they would run through the wash and dryer cycle. And then when you go to put them together, you're like, well, how come that pair's not matching? Where did it go? And so that was part of their little series. It was just a fun little project.
What was the consensus? What did the data tell everyone?
You know, we never did get that from. I never did get the follow up on it, but they actually bought like a dozen transmitters, and they sewed them into socks, and they just ran them through the wash dryer cycle.
So my argument would be like with every scientific study ever, it's human error. You know, we lose in between. We can still blame sock gnomes or whatever, which I think Robert Paper would say is non-demonic intrusion. But
cite that pub.
Yeah, right. But that's really cool. I saw this in the PowerPoint. I was like, I have no idea what this is. I didn't know if it meant to be in there, but that is amazing. And then for the bird enthusiasts, this is cool.
Yeah, kiwis are really neat. So again, like an island, does anybody know the only native mammal to New Zealand?
I do not.
Now, New Zealand has white-tailed deer, believe it or not. and
Really?
California quail.
Are they introduced? Or are they? Yeah.
They're all introduced, but the only native mammal.
Introduced?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, brain fart there. Like I said at the beginning of this show, the wildlife knowledge is
Deep questions by Dr. Grisham.
Deep thoughts.
In the 70s, they even introduced moose into the Fiordland country.
The fjords of New Zealand.
Yeah,
Yes.
but they never survived.
They tried to introduce lesser prairie chickens to Hawaii.
They did. And actually,
Really?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. In the
That I
40s.
didn't know.
Yeah, they didn't do too well. But-
So the only
Everything else they introduced did well.
Yeah,
but prairie
chicken,
chickens
no.
for some reason.
the only native mammal in New Zealand's a bat.
Oh, okay.
So, but like a lot of island birds, flightless birds, and Clint, you can expand upon this. Feral cats, weasels, all those mustelids type things are really hard on these animals because they didn't evolve to have any kind of predator protection. So this is just one of the projects that was kind of our the company that I worked for was they were the leaders in tracking kiwis, and they put them on these leg bands. So they put a leg band on them again, just because they're a flightless bird, and the legs are really big that we can carry a lot of weight on the leg.
And for anyone who's had an introductory ornithology class, and you talk about eggs and body size, there's always the classic X-ray of a kiwi with an egg in it, and I think the egg is approximately 2/3 the size of the individual, which is just amazing physiologically how they can do that. But I've never seen, actually, beyond that photo, I've never seen one up close like this. I thought it was an interesting photo. So I think that's pretty much it with that.
Yeah.
So, sometimes stuff happens in the field, and most of the time it ends fairly badly. But this is a story that I have of the same kid who parked the ATV on top of this truck did this to this tire. And the best thing,
I think I still have that tire as a demonstration.
the greatest thing about this entire story is he finished his rounds of telemetry, loaded the ATV up, brought it back, parked it, and the tire was still full of air, just like this. Nothing.
So I got one for you on that, Blake. I was in my PhD in rental trucks, right? And they don't put off-road tires on rent trucks. And I'm up in that same sand country you were working in. And the funny thing about that part of the world, it's either sand and herbaceous cover and Chinook, or it's mesquite and lots of mesquite and more mesquite.
Yeah.
So we get back to a bunkhouse. I can't remember. It was one of the TPWD WMAs, and there's a giant mesquite thorn, and the tire's leaking air. And the undergrad technician working with me goes, "Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?" And I evaluate the fact that I have no tools to fix it. I have no more plugs left to plug tires. I don't know what to do. And I look at it and I go, "See the thorn that's in it? Get me something like that, but a little bit bigger." So he goes off and he comes back with a mesquite branch with bigger thorns on it. Pull it out, pull the thorn off, and start hammering it into the tire. And the kid goes, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And I go, "It's a plug. It's going to hold. It'll be great. Don't worry about it." And that thing held another 3 weeks of that field season. It was fine.
What amazed me is that didn't rip so these don't have treads on the inside or anything, or steel bands.
Yeah.
I can't believe that tire didn't get ripped to shreds in the process. But you can see here, this thing is just plugged all to hell. These tires, I think Clint spent most of our budget on tires for that entire project.
I think every project does that.
Yeah, same with Mike and Lily's projects now, the BLM and the Sand Country. I spend more money on tires than I do anything else. So, what other stories do we have? Real quick ones to end up before we go for a few.
I got a story about Clinton Bowl.
Oh no!
Yeah, well, it's a good story. It's not a bad one. So we were down. Sean Haskell was doing a mule deer project, I think it was, and we were down in kind of south of Odessa or somewhere out around there. And we were all capturing deer and everybody had a job to do. And all of a sudden Clint disappears for a while. And we thought he went to the bathroom or something. And then he shows back up, and I don't remember if it was an owl or a hawk, but you had caught a hawk, and you showed up with this hawk, and we're like, what the hell, Clint?
It was a great horned owl.
Oh, it was an owl.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
along the same lines, Chris, down in the BVI, he earned the nickname Jungle Ninja while doing field work down there with the grad students, because he would be, when we're down there, the grad students have their own project that we're responsible for, and Dr. Ball and Tracy, they have their own projects, and Dr. Perry, so they would kind of go off and do their own thing. And some mornings we start off with Clint with us, and he would be behind us or around us, and then all of a sudden you just see him cut off into the jungle, and you wouldn't even think about it, and 10 seconds later he's like in the back of your ear, and I think you made a game out of it, right?
No, not really.
Yes, you did. I think you took pride in your ability to sneak up on them.
So, how many of y'all know Dr. Toby Hibbets that's over here at A&M with us?
I don't.
So Toby is a world-class herpetologist, just an amazing guy, savant in the field, right? And I love Toby. He's my herpa Sherpa. But he's like that. He wanders off and he comes back with some herp you couldn't find, never heard of. So we had him out in Terrell County helping us teach a field course for students from Purdue University. Kids had just arrived from Indiana. They were in the bunkhouse eating supper, and we're talking up Dr. Hibbets, right? But if you know herpetologists, they don't dress like the rest of us. So it's summertime, and Toby walks into the bunkhouse in like a tank top and shorts and flip-flops and goes, hey, and just walks straight through and goes to the kitchen. And the kids are like, what's that? And he says hi to everybody, all the faculty, and walks out the back door of the bunkhouse, walks back in with a rattlesnake in a tube. Like 10 minutes, not even that. And he walks up to a student and he just puts it right and goes, hey, you want to hold this? And the kid jumps 3 feet out of the couch he's sitting on. And we go, oh, anyways, yeah, this is Dr. Hibbets. He's the herpetologist. And the kid's just shaking. He goes, yeah, no, I went behind the shed to, nature's call, and I found a snake. Here you go.
So, Clint, how did you capture that great horned owl? I mean, barehanded, probably, but.
Barehanded.
Was it a fledgling, or was it?
No, it was an adult. It was an adult.
So we need more info here.
So the talking about rattlesnakes. I worked on a project with tiger rattlesnakes one time, and one of the things that really was enlightening to me was just how typically unaggressive rattlesnakes are. You hear stories all the time, but I've caught a lot of rattlesnakes, and they just want to be left alone. And tiger rattlesnakes are this beautiful animal, and they have a very hot venom, both neuro and a hemotoxin, because they hunt lizards, and so they have to have something that'll be very effective and quick on a lizard. And the thing about rattlesnakes is like John was saying, that the Hibbets went out and got the rattlesnake and came back in a tube, and you'll get them to go into a tube, and you get a clear tube, and then you grab the tube and the body of the snake at the same point, and then you can hold them, and it's safe, right? That's such a thing. Tiger rattlesnakes have very small heads, and the first third or so of their body is really skinny. And so to get them into a tube up to where you can do that, they have to get almost half their body up there, because they can actually turn around in the tube and come back at your hand. Wow. That's an alarming experience to have happen to you. The other thing is, we were doing surgical implants of transmitters on these animals and then tracking them. And this was all at night in the Sonoran Desert, which was incredibly fun. And you see a lot of really cool stuff out there. But there were times when we would be looking for a rattlesnake, and you have your ATS receiver, and you have your Yagi and everything, and you've got it. And the signal, a lot of times, if you're tracking a very fossorial animal like that, the signal will fade in and out as they go behind like prickly pear and rocks and stuff. But then when you get on top of them, and it's like, I know that snake is here somewhere, and you're walking around looking, and you're not a rookie at this. You've been catching a lot of these snakes. You know what they look like. You've seen them, and you've caught them. And you're walking around trying to get, and then you unhook the Yagi, and you just have the cable. And you reach out with the cable, and you're dangling it right in front of it. until 2 feet in front of you, that damn snake is coiled up right there. And it's like one of those old pictures you used to see where it was kind of like this blurry thing until you kind of just relax your eyes and then the image pops out. It's like that with them. It was really amazing to me how well concealed these animals can be. And it makes me think about how many we just walk by.
Yeah.
Even those of us that are really observant, how many we just walk by and don't even see. And so that's kind of my rattlesnake stories. I never had a real close call with them. We caught a lot of them and stuff. My biggest problem with rattlesnakes was waking up in the middle of the night dreaming that I had messed up.
So the same thing with Clint, what Clint said with chickens when I was finding them on nests. It was VHF tags. They had necklaces on, and for a game bird, they don't want to leave their nest if they're invested with it. So the first year we had a really good year, and I think I had 25 or 26 radio mark females. So the first day, when you're doing radio telemetry with VHF, you keep track of them, and when they're in the same location for a few days, it means they're incubating, and then you go in and you count the number of eggs and back calculate. But that first year, the number of times that I was fooled by a female incubating eggs I was 0 for 15. I mean, and what I mean by that was they always flushed before I saw them. I could not see them at all. I developed a really good search image in the long run, and I was looking for a photo today. In the drought of 2011, we had 3 females incubate nests, and they were really aggressive when you got near their nest because they were defending the one piece of vegetation that was actually had green. And I have a photo of a female who came after us. Normally, when you're on the nest and you're dangling the antenna looking for them, they'll flush and they'll just flush a few feet and they'll walk back and check on what happened to the nest. But this particular hen raised her pinnae and started ramming me in the shins as hard as she possibly can with her forehead. She died a few days later. I probably know why. She probably went after a coyote or something. But she was really aggressive, and it's amazing how most of these times I never saw them before in any way at all. How well they've evolved with their ecosystems. So, John, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, so just going to say, I was thinking about how Chris pointed out in the old days with VHF telemetry, things were a lot different. So we use GPS collars now on coyotes, and some of y'all have been there on captures, tons of fun. But they always have a VHF beacon on them if we need to find the coyote. So there was a time we had a coyote off property, and we are going to go check it out because we thought we had a den site. We wanted to check out the den site. We thought, you know what? Let's follow the female around with VHF. We haven't done that in a while. That'd be kind of fun. And it really made us question a lot of the old data because we kept thinking we had a good bead on where she was, and then it's moving. And when we look back at the GPS data later, we're actually pushing her around. She's avoiding us as we're trying to telemeter her. But we got close to the clump that we thought her den site was in. She pops out of the other brush, runs across into that motte, barks at us, runs into the motte where her den site is, and goes down the hole. And we're standing there going, do you think she's in the hole or did she go somewhere else? I don't know. Let's take the Yagi off and put the cable down in the hole and see if she's down there. And sure enough, you're standing on top of this den site going, the country kid in me wants to stick my hand in there and see what happens. But I'm not going to do that, but I really want to do that.
I did that on a meat den one time. Good.
Okay, well, we're approaching an hour and a half, and we're going to end soon, but I want to end on a topic. Funny stories in the field for John, Chris, and Clint that did not happen to you, but you got to witness. So I'll start to give you an example. So my first year of my PhD, Clint hired a full crew for me to capture chicks at night. And this is before we realized that the limiting factor for chickens was they don't have chicks. And this year, that particular year, we managed to have a few nests that were successful, and we were trying to spotlight them at night. And so this was 2008 with myself, Nick Purius, Chris Fry, who's now a game warden with Parks and Wildlife, Clinton Quidon, and I think Dwayne Lucia. Clint, I don't know I think you might have gone home at this point. You were So we were spotlighting at night. It was 2 or 3 in the morning. We got back to the field house. We actually captured one or two and glued on some transmitters. And so we had this little ranch house that we called Casa de Pollo. It was about an 800 square foot old ranch house where we built bunk beds. And we had so many people in the field house that night that some of the technicians were actually laying down in the floor, sleeping. And Chris Fry, who is now an official law enforcement agent outside of San Angelo, was laying down. It was about 3 a.m. when we were all just resting and whatnot. I was on the couch. Chris and I think maybe Clint were on the floor. His floor had the bunk beds built. And all of a sudden we hear this. I don't know what the sound was, but it was Chris because he was stung in the left testicle by a scorpion. So the noise went a little something like this. It just high pitched and loud for 45 minutes. Because that scorpion got him in the bits. I mean, I don't know what kind it was. And he had no emotions and anything other than just to kind of vocalize for at least 30 minutes. That poor kid, I mean, we gave him some Benadryl, he got some privacy, but just the sound and the humor of someone else, for at least for someone else getting the pain and taking one for the team is something I will never ever forget. I didn't want to be that kid. I just can't forget the sound. It was like a high pitched tornado siren that was coming from a human male age 20, 20 for 45 minutes straight. He was crying on the floor in the fetal position. Of course, we were out kicking him and shit, just being mean as we possibly could to him. Just like deal with it, Chris. So John, do you have anything along those lines for us?
All right, I got one, and I did not personally witness it, but I saw the evidence, and the story's been corroborated independently, so I'm going to share this one. So for y'all that are wildlifers, Dr. Nova Silvia at Texas A&M and Dr. Don Steinbach, now retired from A&M, but our executive director of Texas chapter of TWS, when they were both active faculty in College Station, Nova is well known for being ingenious with capture methods. I mean, his entire career has been figuring out a way to catch something nobody could catch. And they were talking about, how does one catch birds running in front of you in the road? Grouse, prairie chickens, turkeys, whatever you're talking about. It's a bird running in the road. God, I wish we could catch it. And I'd like to believe that there were some Shiner box involved in this discussion, but I don't know that for a fact. And they hatched the idea to mount rocket nets to one of the pickups. And I say I've seen one of the doors. They saved one of the doors, and so it's one of the extension service fleet pickups that Steinbach had, and Nova had the rocket nets, and they had 2 nets on the doors and one mounted on the front bumper, and they had everything set just right, and they had it calibrated to where they thought it would gather the nets out in front of them and catch stuff. And according to both of them independently, they weren't wrong. It did catch the dummy they were trying to catch to test it. However, the per use cost was a little higher than they could bear because it burned holes in both of the doors straight through when the fuel went off and ignited the rockets before they actually left the tracks that they installed on the doors to guide them. So one of the doors was saved as an example, kind of like your tire, Clint. And I'm hearing this story and I go, God, how did you explain that to fleet? Because at that time, you just go to the fleet office and tell them you needed to do maintenance, and they'd say, okay, go take it in, we'll pay it. I've got holes burned in both of my doors. How do you explain that? And Steinbach said, well, John, I'm not good at lying. I just told him what we did. Fair enough. So yeah, that one always comes to mind for me when it's a hold my beer, watch this kind of story. Yeah, I'm surprised there's not a publication out of that one, to be honest with you.
Clint, you have anything to share with us?
I've got a lot of good tech stories, but I think one of my favorite, because we talked about iguanas and stuff, and Krista Mouget, Dr. Mouget, who's no longer with us tragically, she was doing her doctoral work on stout iguanas down in the Caribbean, and they were doing a lot of hand captures of some really big bull iguanas and doing telemetry. And she's working with a guy named Doug Bell, who's kind of in his 50s, kind of latter-day hippie English guy. And they ended up catching this big iguana. And I was down there and I was taking some pictures for him and helping him out and stuff. because to catch them, you got to kind of get around them and stuff so they can't get away. Anyways, Doug's got the animal holding it on his lap. You hold the legs down and everything. And Krista's kneeling down. And so Doug's sitting on a rock holding this lizard while Krista's getting ready to pit tag it and do the nuchal crest and everything. You know this story, Blake?
Yeah, you told me this story.
Holding this lizard. And Krista's kneeling down in front of him. So she's just about eye level with his navel while he's holding the lizard. And I walk around behind Krista to take pictures and help. And I see that the whole crotch of Doug's pants is ripped out, and he's not wearing any underwear, and it's all right in front of Krista while she's working up this iguana. And I looked around, and I looked at Krista, and she's just got this look on her face while she's working on the iguana.
Oh man!
I just love the memory of Krista doing that. So that was pretty funny, and they got the job done. But that was a very visual distraction for her. I think.
That's called professionalism.
I was thinking what could happen if that lizard got one of its hind feet free.
Oh my goodness, we have another Chris situation. We hear
Oh,
that
yeah.
high-pitched voice
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So, Chris, do you have anything to share with us?
Just trying to think of a good one. I mean, back, I don't know, 10 years ago, we caught some woodland caribou in British Columbia up at about 11,000 feet in a helicopter. And I took one of our engineers with us because they wanted to experience it and get some field work. And so we go to like a Perkins before we fly. And he ordered the Belgian waffles with the whipped cream and strawberries on them. And I go, are you sure you want to get the Belgian waffles? Oh yeah, I'll be fine. So I ordered toast and water, and I might add a cup of coffee because I mean, 11,000 feet in helicopters can be pretty bumpy. Plus, you're chasing animals. So we get up there and we're looking for animals. And we're going up and down, and we catch up drafts and down drafts, and we look over and he's turning kind of green. And are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay. Well, 5 minutes later, the pilot says, hey, don't puke in my airplane or my aircraft, which was a helicopter. So the biologist that I was with, him and I start sharing puke stories as we're flying. And so this engineer is getting greener and greener. And finally he goes, all over the back seat of the helicopter. And the pilot is pissed. And me and the biologist start laughing because we're like, he's like, do you want some more syrup with those Belgian waffles?
So,
and it looked like somebody stabbed them because of the strawberries and everything that came up with it.
Everywhere.
Oh, it was a mess. It was a mess.
So the photo in the flyer with me on the truck. So that was the day that Parks and Wildlife was filming, and Dwayne Lucia was out there. And the reason I got stuck was because Lucia called me about the time that I went through this little sand pit where I knew I had to put it in four-wheel drive. Well, he called me and I answered. I knew better. This is my own fault. Saying, "Hey, I'm stuck. Come get me." Boom, then I'm stuck. And anyway, when things go bad, they tend to go worse. And what's not known about that photo of me on that truck is I'm only wearing one sock in that boot because I had my own Belgian waffles moment that morning and we were filming all day. So if you know now, I carry an orange backpack with me, and everywhere I go in the field hiking, there is toilet paper in the back of that because that was the one, because it took us like 12 hours to get that truck out. I was wearing one sock all goddamn day with Parks and Wildlife, and my feet was all blistered up and nasty and things like that. So undergrad, this is what you get to look forward to when you're doing your MS. And we're going to end on the fact that if you're a graduate student or an undergraduate doing field work, there's two rules when you break equipment. The first one is you tell us because we don't get mad because we've been there, done that. And two, we know you're lying about how it actually happened because, as you've witnessed before or today, we've been there and we've done it. And man, Clint's not wrong with the truck and the ATVs. Most of the issues were my fault. So, uh, so keep that in mind going forward. We know what really happened. We just kind of brush it off because we've been responsible for the same issues before.
And shit happens, but you can
God,
still get work
100%.
done. So don't, just because something doesn't work, don't call it a day. There's always stuff you can do.
Yeah, the rule of thumb when I build budgets for equipment and maintenance and stuff like that is to take what I need and then add like 20% for maintenance and replacement on all these things. Because if you're doing field work correctly, you're going to break things. It's going to happen, and it may not just be things; it might be your own body in some way. I mean, uh, I remember one time we were out in the field. Clint almost lost an eye to a piece of rebar on accident. You know,
Mm.
I got hit in the back of the head with a magnet from a drop net on a windy day. It detached and
Yeah.
swung around the pole and hit me in the back of the head and knocked me out. Staples, my PhD student, his nickname is Staples because he dropped a magnet on top of his head and he has 8 staples across his head for 2 or 3 months. So those things happen. And for our viewers who are listening in, we have the permits to do this stuff. Okay, we have to go through all sorts of permitting processes, both ethical, state, federal, private land, but stuff still happens.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we could probably do another podcast
Easily.
Oh yeah, for
to
sure.
this, and I welcome you guys back. But we're going way over, and it's Friday night. So Dr. Tomachek, Chris, Dr. Bolin, and our TWS crew, we thank you guys for spending Friday night with us. We appreciate your time and attention and your stories. I had a blast, and I think this has been kind of the highlight for my quarantine is spending Friday nights with you guys. We're going to continue this. I'm going to make the announcement about our next guest, but we're going to sign off for our audience. Thank you guys. I'll have this uploaded to YouTube and Anchor within the next 3 to 5 days, depending on
Cool.
quarantine, whatever. But thanks again for chiming in tonight, and we're going to end the stream. Thank you, audience.